The fluorescent lights above me flickered 3 times before settling into their usual electric buzz. I stood behind the counter of Quick Stop, a small convenience store on the edge of Millbrook, watching as the last evening customer drove away into the gathering darkness. My manager had left me a handwritten note taped to the register, just like he did every night. 7 rules written in his shaky handwriting. 7 rules that made no sense. 7 rules I was about to break for the first time. I crumpled the note and tossed it into the trash bin. After all, what could possibly happen in a quiet store in the middle of nowhere? My name is Aiden, and I am 23 years old. I have worked the night shift at Quick Stop for exactly 2 weeks now. The pay is exceptional, almost triple what other stores in Millbrook offer for the same work. When I first interviewed for the position, the manager, an older man named Gerald, had been very clear about one thing. Follow the rules, no matter how strange they seem. At the time, I had nodded and agreed, thinking they were just quirky store policies. I needed the money desperately. My student loans were crushing me, my rent was overdue, and my car was making sounds that promised an expensive repair bill in my near future. A job paying $28 an hour for overnight convenience store work seemed too good to pass up, even with weird rules attached. Before I go further, I want to ask you something. Have you ever ignored a warning because it seemed too ridiculous to be true? Have you ever dismissed something important because you thought you knew better? If you have experienced anything similar, or if this story resonates with you, please leave a comment below. I would love to hear your thoughts. And if you are enjoying this so far, please consider hitting that like button and subscribing to the channel. Sharing this story with others who might appreciate it would mean a lot as well. Trust me, what I am about to tell you is something everyone should know before taking a job that seems too good to be true. Gerald had spent my first night explaining each rule in painstaking detail. He was 67 years old, with thin white hair and hands that trembled constantly. His eyes held a haunted quality, like someone who had seen terrible things and could not forget them. He wore the same outfit every day: brown slacks, a white button-down shirt, and a navy blue cardigan that had seen better days. When he spoke about the rules, his voice dropped to barely above a whisper, and he kept glancing toward the dark corners of the store as if something might be listening. The first rule was simple: never turn off all the lights at once. At least 3 lights must remain on at all times throughout the store, no matter what. Gerald had emphasized this rule more than any other, his wrinkled face growing pale as he explained it. He told me that the store needed light, that darkness allowed things to move freely, that complete darkness was an invitation. I had nodded along, thinking he was just a paranoid old man worried about robberies or vandalism. The second rule read, if a customer asks for the usual, do not serve them. Politely tell them you are out of stock, even if the item is right there. Gerald had explained that regular customers never ask for the usual. They specify what they want. Only something pretending to be a regular customer would use that phrase. Testing to see if you know the rules. The third rule stated, between midnight and 4 a.m., do not look at your reflection in any surface. Avoid mirrors, phone screens, or any reflective glass. Gerald said that during those hours, reflections show the truth. And sometimes the truth is something you do not want to see looking back at you. The fourth rule was specific. If you hear knocking from the back freezer, knock back twice and walk away. Never open it until exactly 5 minutes have passed. Gerald refused to explain this one fully, saying only that something waits in the cold, and it gets impatient. The fifth rule read, any customer wearing all red must be served within 60 seconds. No delays, no conversation beyond necessary transaction. Gerald had been very serious about this one. He said that those in red are passing through, and delays anger them. An angry one is dangerous for everyone, not just you. The sixth rule stated, never answer the store phone after 1 a.m. Let it ring, no matter how persistent it gets. Gerald explained that after 1 in the morning, anything calling is not from our world, and answering creates a connection that should not exist. The seventh and final rule read, if someone enters and the entry bell does not chime, they are not leaving the same way they came in. Do not engage, do not make eye contact, continue working as if they are not there. Gerald said these visitors are already inside, and acknowledging them gives them permission to interact with you. For 2 weeks, I had followed these rules religiously. Every night from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., I worked alone in Quick Stop, keeping 3 lights on, refusing anyone who asked for the usual, avoiding my reflection after midnight, waiting 5 minutes before opening the freezer after hearing knocks, serving red customers quickly, ignoring the phone after 1 a.m., and pretending not to see customers who entered without the bell chiming. And nothing had happened. No supernatural events. No mysterious disappearances. Just 8 hours of stocking shelves, serving the occasional late-night customer, and fighting to stay awake. Tonight was different. Tonight I was tired, frustrated, and convinced that Gerald was just a superstitious old fool. I had bills to pay, and I was wasting electricity keeping unnecessary lights on all night. The power bill came out of the store's profits, and our profits determined our annual bonuses. By keeping extra lights on, I was literally burning money at exactly 10:47 p.m. after the last customer had left and I had locked the front door for a quick inventory check. I made my decision. I walked to the breaker panel in the back storage room, a small windowless space that smelled of cardboard and cleaning supplies. The panel was old, with rusted switches and faded labels. I flipped them one by one, watching as each section of the store went dark. The refrigerator units powered down with a mechanical sigh. The overhead fluorescents winked out. The security lights above the entrance faded to black. The emergency exit signs went dark. Everything, the store plunged into complete darkness, broken only by the pale moonlight filtering through the front windows. Even that seemed weaker than it should be, as if the darkness inside the store was somehow thicker, more substantial than normal shadows. I stood there in the storage room for a moment, feeling pleased with myself. Nothing happened. No alarms. No supernatural events. Just blessed silence and darkness. I could almost hear Gerald's voice in my head, warning me, pleading with me to turn the lights back on. But I pushed that voice away, see? I muttered to myself, pulling out my phone. Just superstitious garbage. I would give it 5 minutes, then turn the lights back on. No harm done. I would save a few dollars on electricity, prove that the rules were nonsense, and maybe convince Gerald to drop this ridiculous policy that I used my phone's flashlight to navigate back through the storage room. The beam seemed weaker than usual, barely penetrating the thick darkness around me. I had just reached the doorway leading back into the main store when I heard it. A sound like fingernails scraping against glass. Slow, deliberate, rhythmic. Coming from somewhere near the back of the store, past the refrigerator units, I froze, my heart suddenly hammering in my chest. It is just the building settling, I told myself, trying to keep my breathing steady. Old buildings make noise. The metal contracts in the cool night air. That is all it is. But even as I thought this, I knew it was wrong. The sound was too deliberate, too purposeful. It moved along the walls, following a path, circling the store from the inside. The scraping continued, growing louder with each pass. It moved from the back wall to the side wall, then to the front of the store. I turned my phone light toward the sound, but the beam barely penetrated 3 feet into the darkness. The shadows seemed to swallow the light, absorbing it like a sponge. Beyond my small circle of illumination, the darkness was absolute, and it was moving that I watched in horror as the shadows began to shift and flow, no longer behaving like normal darkness. They twisted and coiled like living smoke, forming shapes that appeared almost solid before dissolving back into blackness. The temperature in the store dropped rapidly. My breath became visible in the suddenly frigid air, forming clouds that hung motionless before slowly dissipating. The cold was not natural. It felt wet and heavy, pressing against my skin like damp cloth that a cold draft swept through the store, though all the doors and windows were closed and locked. The draft carried a smell with it, something organic and rotten, like meat left too long in a warm place. I gagged, covering my nose and mouth with my hand. The scraping sound had stopped, replaced by something worse. Breathing. Heavy, wet breathing coming from multiple directions at once. As if the store itself had developed lungs and was now inhaling and exhaling around me. Get the lights back on, a voice in my head screamed. Get them on now. I turned and ran toward the storage room, my phone light bouncing wildly as I moved. Behind me, I heard something else. Footsteps. Heavy, dragging footsteps that were definitely not my own. They followed me, matching my pace, getting closer. But there was something wrong with the rhythm. Too many steps. Too many feet hitting the floor. As if multiple things were walking behind me. I burst into the storage room and frantically reached for the breaker panel. My hands shook so badly I could barely grip the switches. Come on. Come on, I whispered desperately, flipping them up one by one. Nothing happened. The lights stayed off. I flipped them again, panic rising in my throat. Still nothing. The footsteps reached the storage room doorway. I could hear them clearly now, along with that wet breathing. So close it felt like hot breath on the back of my neck that I slammed all the breakers up at once, using both hands, putting all my strength into it. The lights blazed back to life, flooding the store with harsh white light. I spun around, chest heaving, expecting to see something behind me. Nothing. The storage room was empty. The doorway was clear. I ran out into the main store, my phone still clutched in my shaking hand. The store was exactly as it should be. Fully lit. Silent. Empty. The refrigerator units hummed normally. The fluorescent lights buzzed with their usual electric sound. Everything appeared completely normal. But the temperature was still wrong. The air still carried that unnatural chill, though it was slowly warming. And on the floor near the entrance, I saw them. Wet footprints. Large, bare footprints that definitely had not been there before I turned off the lights. They led from the front door, which was still locked, to the counter, then down the main aisle toward the storage room. The prints were detailed enough that I could see individual toes, the arch of a foot, even what looked like cracks in old, damaged skin. But the truly disturbing part was how they ended. Halfway down the main aisle, the prints simply stopped. Not faded away, not smudged, just stopped, as if whatever made them had simply ceased to exist mid-step or had been lifted straight up into the air. That I approached the prints slowly, my legs feeling weak and unreliable. The moisture was not water. It was thicker, more viscous, with a faint yellowish tinge. I knelt down carefully, keeping my distance, and shined my phone light on the nearest print. The substance had a smell, that same rotten meat odor from before, but concentrated. Up close, I could see that it was not just liquid. There were solid components too, small dark particles suspended in the fluid. I did not want to think about what those particles might be. I grabbed paper towels from the bathroom and spent 20 minutes cleaning up the prints, my stomach churning the entire time. The substance soaked through multiple layers of paper towels, and by the time I was finished, I had used half a roll. I double-bagged everything and threw it in the dumpster outside, then scrubbed my hands raw in the bathroom sink, using almost an entire bottle of industrial hand soap. When I returned to the counter, I pulled the crumpled note from the trash and smoothed it out with shaking hands. Gerald's handwriting seemed to accuse me from the paper. Rule 1. Never turn off all the lights at once. At least 3 lights must remain on at all times throughout the store, no matter what. I had broken the first rule within an hour of my shift starting. What else had Gerald been right about? What else was waiting in this store, held back only by rules I had dismissed as superstition? I kept all the lights on for the rest of the night. Not just 3, all of them. Every fluorescent tube, every display light, every bulb in every fixture. The store was so bright it hurt my eyes, but I did not care. Bright was safe. Bright kept the darkness away. And after what I had experienced, I never wanted to see that kind of darkness again. At 11:34 p.m., the door chimed as someone entered. The sound made me jump, my nerves still frayed from earlier. An older woman walked in, wearing a faded blue coat and carrying a worn leather purse. She looked normal enough. Gray hair pulled back in a tight bun, kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, a slight smile on her weathered face. She appeared to be in her 70s, with the slow, careful movements of someone with arthritis or joint problems. She walked directly to the counter without browsing any aisles, her shoes squeaking slightly on the freshly mopped floor. "Good evening, dear," she said pleasantly, her voice carrying a slight accent I could not quite place. "I would like the usual, please." My stomach dropped. The usual, the exact phrase from Rule 2. I glanced at the note still lying on the counter, then back at the woman. She stood there patiently, her smile never wavering, hands clasped in front of her purse. But something was off about her. Her eyes, while appearing kind, did not blink. Not once. I watched her carefully, counting the seconds in my head. 10 seconds, 20 seconds, 30 seconds. She stared at me with those unblinking eyes, her smile frozen in place like it had been painted on her face. "I am terribly sorry, ma'am," I said, trying to keep my voice steady and polite. "We are out of stock right now." Her smile widened slightly, showing more teeth. "Out of stock? But dear, you have never been out of stock before. I come here every night at this time. You always have the usual ready for me." Her voice remained pleasant, but there was something underneath it now, something cold and sharp. I am sorry, I repeated, my hand sliding toward the phone behind the counter. We do not have it tonight. Perhaps tomorrow. The woman's head tilted to the side. Not a normal tilt, not the way a person moves when they are confused or thinking. Her head tilted far to the side, at an angle that would have broken a normal person's neck. The movement was smooth and continuous, her head rotating nearly 90 degrees until it was almost parallel with her shoulder. Her body remained perfectly still, facing forward, while her head hung sideways. And through it all, she kept smiling. That is very unfortunate, she whispered, her voice now layered with other voices. Some were high-pitched and childlike. Some were impossibly deep and resonant. Some were not quite human, making sounds that human vocal cords could not produce. All of them spoke in unison, creating a horrible harmony that made my teeth ache. I am so very hungry, Aiden. So very hungry. She knew my name. I had never seen this woman before in my life, had never spoken to her, had never even seen her photograph. But she knew my name. I took a step back from the counter, my hand finally reaching the phone. But before I could grab it, before I could dial anything, the woman moved. Her body jerked forward, closing half the distance to the counter in a single motion. Her movements were wrong, mechanical, like a marionette being pulled by strings. Her head remained at that impossible angle, her smile growing wider, stretching her face in ways human skin should not stretch. The usual keeps me satisfied, she said in that horrible layered voice. Without it, I must find other ways to feed, other sources of sustenance. Your fear smells delicious, Aiden. So fresh, so pure. It has been too long since I tasted fear this strong. Her eyes, still unblinking, began to change. The pupils expanded, growing larger and larger until they swallowed the irises completely. Then they kept growing, consuming the whites of her eyes, spreading across her face like spilled ink. Within seconds, her entire eyes were solid black, reflective and wet like oil. In their dark surfaces, I could see reflections that did not match the store around us. Strange places, twisted landscapes, things moving in darkness. That I will see you again, Aiden, she said, her mouth opening wider than any human mouth could open. Very soon. So very soon. She turned, her body rotating in segments like a rotating display, each part moving independently before snapping into alignment. She walked toward the door, that jerky puppet walk, her head still hanging at that broken angle. As she reached the exit, she did not slow down. She did not reach for the handle. She simply walked through the closed door, not opening it, not breaking it. Her body passed through the solid glass and metal as if they were not there, like she was a ghost walking through a wall. The door did not move. The glass did not crack. She simply ceased to exist on this side and continued existing on the other side. That I stood frozen behind the counter, unable to move, unable to breathe. The door had not opened. The lock had not turned. She had simply walked through it and vanished into the night. Through the glass, I could see the empty parking lot. No sign of the old woman. No car pulling away. Nothing. I looked down at the floor where she had walked. No wet footprints this time, but there was something. A faint discoloration on the tiles, a slight darkening of the surface, as if her presence had stained the floor itself. That I looked down at the rules again, reading them carefully. Rule 7. If someone enters and the entry bell does not chime, they are not leaving the same way they came in. Do not engage. Do not make eye contact. Continue working as if they are not there. But the bell had chimed when she entered. I had heard it clearly, that cheerful electronic ding that announced every customer, which meant she was human when she arrived. Or at least, she was human enough to trigger the door sensor. But by the time she left, she had become something else entirely. Something that could pass through solid matter. Something with multiple voices and black eyes and a hunger that went beyond anything natural. That I spent the next 30 minutes checking every lock, every window, every possible entry point. Everything was secure. The store was sealed tight. But I no longer felt safe. The locks and walls that had seemed so solid now felt flimsy and inadequate. If something could walk through a door, what good were locks? If something could exist in complete darkness, what good were lights? The rules were the only real protection, and I had already broken one. The rest of the night crept forward with agonizing slowness. Every sound made me jump. Every shadow seemed to hide something terrible. I kept the rules in front of me on the counter, reading them over and over, memorizing every word. At 12:15 a.m., I heard it. A phone ringing. The store's landline, an old rotary phone that Gerald insisted we keep plugged in, began to ring. Its shrill, old-fashioned tone cut through the silence like a knife, each ring seeming louder than the last. The phone sat on a small shelf behind the counter, its black plastic body looking ancient and out of place among the modern equipment. The handset trembled slightly with each ring, and I could see the mechanical bell inside hammering back and forth through the clear plastic dial. I stared at it, my heart racing. I remembered Rule 6. Never answer the store phone after 1 a.m. Let it ring, no matter how persistent it gets. But it was only 12:15 a.m. Surely it was safe to answer before the forbidden hour. Maybe it was Gerald checking in. Maybe it was an emergency. I reached for the phone, then hesitated, my fingers hovering an inch above the handset. The rules had been right about everything else. The lights. The woman asking for the usual. Maybe I should not take chances. Maybe the 1 a.m. cutoff was specific for a reason, but answering before that hour was fine. Or maybe the rule meant something different. Maybe any answer after the start of the shift was dangerous. The phone rang 15 times before finally falling silent. I exhaled in relief, not realizing I had been holding my breath. The sudden silence was almost worse than the ringing. It felt expectant, like something was waiting to see what I would do next. I stood there, watching the phone, half expecting it to leap off the shelf or start ringing again. Then it did start ringing again. And again. And again. Each time I resisted the urge to answer, my curiosity burning. Who would call a convenience store in the middle of the night? What did they want? The phone rang 7 more times over the next 40 minutes, always stopping after exactly 15 rings. Each sequence of rings felt like a test, like something was checking to see if I would break. If I would give in and answer at 12:58 a.m. 2 minutes before the forbidden hour, the phone rang one more time. But this time was different. This time, I heard a voice. A woman's voice, coming from the phone itself, even though I had not picked up the receiver. The voice seemed to emanate from the entire device, vibrating through the plastic body, speaking directly into the air. Aiden, the voice called. It was soft, gentle, filled with genuine distress. Aiden, please pick up. I need help. I am trapped. Please, you have to help me. I cannot get out. It is so dark here. So cold. Pleased that my hand moved toward the phone of its own accord, drawn by the desperation in that voice. It sounded so real, so human, so genuinely terrified. What if someone really needed help? What if there was an actual emergency? What if someone was trapped somewhere, calling for rescue, and I was ignoring them because of superstitious rules? My fingers wrapped around the cold receiver. The voice continued, growing more frantic. Please, Aiden. Please pick up. I can see you. I can see you reaching for the phone. Just pick it up. Just talk to me. I am so scared. It is getting closer. Pleased that I was about to lift the receiver when my eyes flicked to the clock on the wall. The second hand swept past the 1 a.m. exactly. The moment the forbidden hour began I jerked my hand back as if the phone had burned me. The voice cut off immediately, replaced by a sound that would haunt my nightmares for years. It was like grinding metal and screaming wind and breaking glass all combined into one horrible noise. The phone itself began to shake violently on the shelf, hopping and skittering like a living thing trying to escape. The handset lifted slightly off its cradle, hovering in midair for a moment before slamming back down with a crack that split the plastic. The noise lasted for exactly 10 seconds, then stopped abruptly. Complete silence returned. The phone sat motionless, now looking completely normal except for the crack running down the handset. Slowly, carefully, I approached it to check for damage. That is when I saw the wall behind it. Words had appeared, scratched deep into the paint as if by metal claws. The letters were large and jagged, carved with such force that the drywall beneath showed through. So close, Aiden. So very close. We almost had you. Next time. I stared at those words for a long time, my mind struggling to process what I was seeing. Something had tried to trick me into answering the phone. Something that knew my name, knew exactly where I was, and was actively, intelligently, trying to make me break the rules. This was not random. This was not coincidence. Something was hunting me, testing me, waiting for me to make a mistake. I pulled out my phone and took a picture of the wall. Gerald needed to see this. But as I looked at the image on my screen, I realized something else. I could see my reflection in the black screen of my phone. My face stared back at me, looking terrified and exhausted. And it was 1:03 a.m. I was in the forbidden time. I had just broken Rule 3. I looked back at my phone screen, unable to stop myself. My reflection was still there, but it had changed. My eyes were wrong. The pupils were too large, swallowing too much of the iris. And my expression was different. My reflection was smiling. I was not smiling. I was definitely not smiling. But my reflection's mouth was curved upward in a wide, delighted grin. I dropped the phone like it had shocked me. It clattered on the counter, the screen going dark. When I picked it up again, keeping my eyes averted from the screen, I turned off the display and shoved it deep in my pocket. No more looking at reflective surfaces. Not until 4 a.m. Not until the forbidden time had passed. I had already broken 2 rules tonight. I could not afford to break any more. At 1:45 a.m. I needed to restock the ice cream section. We had sold out of several popular flavors during the evening shift, and the delivery truck had left new inventory in the back freezer. I approached the heavy metal door with reluctance, my stomach tight with anxiety. But it needed to be done. I could not leave the display cases empty. I was reaching for the door handle when I heard it. Knocking. 3 slow, deliberate knocks coming from inside the freezer. Each knock was loud and hollow, echoing with a metallic ring. I froze, my hand inches from the handle, my breath catching in my throat. Rule 4. If you hear knocking from the back freezer, knock back twice and walk away. Never open it until exactly 5 minutes have passed. Asterisk, the knocking came again. 3 knocks, perfectly spaced, measured and patient. This was not someone accidentally bumping into something. This was not boxes settling or ice shifting. This was deliberate. This was intentional. This was a signal. I raised my fist and knocked twice on the metal door, the sound flat and dull compared to the knocks from inside. Then I immediately stepped back, putting distance between myself and the freezer. Whatever was in there knocked again, but this time it was different. The patient, measured knocking was gone, replaced by frantic pounding. Dozens of impacts hitting the door from the inside, so hard and so fast that they blurred into a continuous sound. The metal door buckled slightly with each blow, the hinges groaning under the stress. Something was trying very hard to get out. I could hear other sounds now too, mixed in with the pounding. Scratching, scraping, and something that might have been words, screaming, unintelligible but clearly desperate. The temperature around the freezer dropped rapidly. Frost began to form on the outside of the door, spreading outward in crystalline patterns. My breath came out in thick clouds. I walked quickly back to the front counter, putting as much distance between myself and the freezer as possible. I checked my phone, being very careful not to look at the screen, just glancing at the time from an angle. 1:47 a.m. 5 minutes. I had to wait 5 minutes before I could open that door. The pounding continued for another minute, growing more violent, more frantic. The entire freezer unit shook. I could see it from where I stood at the counter, the metal housing vibrating visibly. Then, at exactly 1:49 a.m., the pounding stopped. The sudden silence was almost worse than the noise. I stared at the freezer, watching for any movement, any sign of what was happening inside. Nothing. Just the normal hum of the refrigeration unit, running as it always did. The frost on the outside of the door began to melt, dripping water onto the floor at exactly 1:52 a.m. 5 minutes after I had first heard the knocking, I returned to the freezer. Each step felt like wading through deep water. I did not want to open that door. Everything in my body was screaming at me to leave it closed, to forget about the ice cream, to let the display cases stay empty. But I needed this job. I needed the money. And the rules said 5 minutes. The rules had been right about everything else. My hand shook as I pulled open the heavy door. Cold air rushed out, colder than it should be, carrying with it the smell of spoiled meat and something chemical. I gagged, covering my nose and mouth with my sleeve. The freezer was exactly as it should be. Boxes of frozen goods stacked neatly on metal shelves. Bags of ice piled in the corner. The temperature gauge reading -10 degrees Fahrenheit. No damage. No sign that anything had been pounding on the door from the inside just minutes before. But the back wall told a different story. Written in frost, in letters 3 inches tall, was a message: "Thank you for waiting." The words seemed to glow slightly in the dim light of the freezer, the frost that formed them thicker and whiter than the normal condensation. Below the message, scratched into the metal wall itself, were tally marks. Hundreds of them. Thousands of them. They covered every available surface on the back wall, carefully organized into groups of 5. The way prisoners in movies mark the passing days, I grabbed the boxes of ice cream I needed and backed out of the freezer quickly, letting the door slam shut. As I turned away, I heard it. A single knock from inside. Just one. Soft, almost gentle. Like a goodbye. Or a promise. I will be waiting. I practically ran back to the front of the store at 2:33 a.m. during a moment when I was restocking the chip aisle, trying to keep my hands busy and my mind occupied. I caught my reflection in the glass door of a refrigerator unit. It happened accidentally. I was bending down to place a box of chips on the bottom shelf, and when I straightened up, I was face to face with my reflection. I froze. Rule 3. Between midnight and 4 a.m., do not look at your reflection in any surface. But I had already seen it. My reflection stood in the glass, staring back at me, and it was not quite right. My reflection was not moving in sync with me. There was a delay, a fraction of a second lag, like watching a video with the audio and visual slightly out of sync. I raised my hand slowly. My reflection raised its hand a moment later. My reflection was smiling. I was not. The smile was wide and genuine, showing too many teeth, as if my reflection was delighted by something it found hilarious. The eyes were completely black, not like the old woman's had been, but black throughout, like someone had filled them with ink. There was no white, no iris, no pupil, just solid, reflective black that seemed to absorb the light rather than reflect it. And behind my reflection, in the glass, I could see someone else. A tall figure standing directly behind me, so close that if they were real, I would have felt their breath on my neck. The figure was thin and wrong, with limbs that bent in too many places and a head that hung forward at an unnatural angle. It was reaching toward my reflection's shoulder with fingers that were far too long. I spun around, my heart racing, my hands raised to defend myself. Nobody was there. The aisle was empty. I was completely alone. But when I looked back at the glass, against every instinct that told me not to, the figure was still there, still standing behind my reflection, still reaching toward it. And now my reflection was no longer smiling. It was opening its mouth, wider and wider, the jaw unhinging like a snake, revealing darkness inside that seemed to go on forever. I ran. I did not look at any reflective surface for the rest of the night. Not the windows, not my phone screen, not the glass doors of the refrigerator units, not the stainless steel of the coffee machine, not even the shiny surface of the counter. I kept my eyes down, focused on the floor, fighting every instinct to check my appearance, to glance at my phone, to look at anything that might show me my reflection. I knocked over a display of energy drinks at one point and had to clean them up with my eyes closed, feeling with my hands, because the cans were reflective enough to show distorted images, and I was not taking any chances. My neck ached from keeping my head down. My eyes burned from staring at the floor. But I did not look up. Not until the safe hours returned at 3:15 a.m., the door chimed. The sound made me jump so badly I nearly fell over. I looked up, being very careful to look at the door itself and not at the glass. A man entered. He was tall, probably in his 40s, with close-cropped gray hair and a weathered face. He wore jeans, work boots, and a red hoodie. Completely, entirely, thoroughly red. The hoodie was crimson, bright and eye-catching, expensive-looking. All red.my blood ran cold. Rule 5. Any customer wearing all red must be served within 60 seconds. No delays, no conversation beyond necessary transaction. I looked at the clock on the wall. 3:15 and 23 seconds a.m. I started counting in my head, keeping track of every second. The man walked slowly through the aisles, taking his time, examining products with careful attention. He picked up a bottle of water, studied the label, put it back, picked up a different brand. 15 seconds. He moved to the snack aisle, his footsteps deliberate and unhurried. 20 seconds. He grabbed a candy bar, then added a bag of chips. 30 seconds. He continued browsing, moving from aisle to aisle with frustrating slowness. 40 seconds. Sir? I called out, trying to keep my voice friendly and helpful. Can I help you find anything? We will be closing this section temporarily for cleaning in a few minutes. It was a lie, but I needed him at the counter. The man looked up at me, and for a moment I saw something in his eyes. A flicker of understanding. a hint of knowledge, as if he knew exactly what I was doing and why. He nodded and headed toward the counter. 50 seconds that he placed his items on the counter. 3 items: water, candy, chips. I scanned them as fast as I could, my hands moving on autopilot. The register beeped with each scan. $8.47, I said, my voice tight with tension. 58 seconds. The man pulled out his wallet with what seemed like deliberate slowness. He opened it, examined the bills inside, slowly pulled out a 10. 59 seconds. He handed me the $10 bill at exactly the 60-second mark that I made change in record time, my hands moving faster than I thought possible. $1.53. I counted it twice to make sure, dropped it into his waiting palm, and bagged his items in one smooth motion. The entire transaction took 7 seconds. 67 seconds total since he had entered. 7 seconds over the limit. Thank you. Have a good night, I said, trying to keep the tremor out of my voice. The man smiled. It was a normal smile, warm and genuine. His eyes were kind, crinkled at the corners with age and experience. He looked completely ordinary, like someone's father or uncle. Thank you, he said in a regular, pleasant voice. You did well. Mostly. He picked up his bag and turned toward the door. Mostly? The word echoed in my head as I watched him leave. What did that mean? What happened after 60 seconds? Was it a hard limit or a grace period? The man pushed open the door, the bell chiming cheerfully, and walked out into the night. Through the window, I watched him cross the parking lot to a red pickup truck, climb in, and drive away normally. Nothing supernatural. Nothing terrible, but the encounter left me shaken. The way he had moved through the store, the deliberate slowness, the knowing look in his eyes when I had tried to rush him. It felt like a test. Like he had been checking to see if I knew the rules, if I would follow them, if I would succeed or fail. And I had been 7 seconds late that I collapsed onto the stool behind the counter, my legs shaking so badly I could not stand. My shirt was soaked with sweat despite the cool air. What would have happened if I had taken longer? What would have happened at 70 seconds? 80? 90? The rule did not specify consequences, which somehow made it worse. My imagination filled in the blanks with increasingly horrific possibilities. The hours crawled by with agonizing slowness. I kept checking the clock, watching the minutes tick past with frustrating lethargy. At 3:47 a.m., I heard scratching sounds coming from the walls. Not from the bathroom, not from the freezer, from inside the walls themselves, as if something was moving through the spaces between the studs, circling the store. The scratching followed me wherever I went, always staying just out of sight, always in the walls beside me. At 4:01 a.m., the forbidden time ended. I finally allowed myself to glance at my phone screen. My own normal reflection stared back at me. No black eyes, no wrong smile, no figure standing behind me. Just my exhausted face, pale and sweaty, with dark circles under my eyes. I looked like I had aged 10 years in one night. The scratching in the wall stopped at exactly 4:01 a.m., as if whatever made it knew the rules too and understood that its time was over. The store fell into a normal silence, just the hum of refrigerators and the buzz of lights. But I could not relax. I kept thinking about everything that had happened. The darkness when I turned off the lights. The woman who walked through the door. The voice on the phone. The thing in the freezer. My wrong reflection. The man in our ED'd at 5:30 a.m. As the first hints of dawn began to lighten the sky outside, Gerald arrived for the morning shift. He looked at me as he entered, taking in my exhausted face, my shaking hands, the sweat stains on my shirt despite the cool air conditioning. He did not look surprised. He looked sad, disappointed, like a parent discovering their child had ignored an important warning. You broke a rule, did you not? He said quietly. It was not a question. His voice was gentle, understanding, but firm. I nodded, unable to speak. My throat was tight with emotion. Relief at seeing another human being. Shame at having ignored his warnings. Fear at what I had experienced. But you followed the others, he continued, setting his keys on the counter. Good. That is why you are still here. That is why you are still you. The last person who worked nights did not listen. He broke 3 rules in one shift. He thought he was being smart, being efficient, proving that the rules were unnecessary. What happened to him? I whispered, though part of me did not want to know the answer. Gerald's face grew even paler, if that was possible. His hands trembled more than usual as he removed his coat and hung it on the hook by the office door. We found his uniform in the back freezer the next morning, neatly folded on the floor. His shoes placed carefully beside it, laces tied together. His name tag placed on top, perfectly centered. But we never found him. The police searched everywhere. Dogs, helicopters, volunteers. Nothing. Just his clothes. And a message scratched into the freezer wall. What did it say? I asked, though I already knew the answer. He opened the door, Gerald replied. He had heard the knocking at 2:17 a.m. The cameras showed him walking to the freezer. But he did not knock back. He did not wait. He opened the door immediately and stepped inside. The door closed behind him. When I arrived for my shift and checked the freezer, his clothes were there. And the message. And the tally marks. Thousands more than had been there the day before. I felt sick. The tally marks. The frozen message thanking me for waiting. That could have been me. If I had opened the door immediately when I heard the knocking, I would have stepped into something that was not our world. Something that collected people and kept them, counting the days and scratches on metal walls. Gerald pulled out a fresh note card and began writing. His hand shook so badly the letters were barely legible, but I could make them out. The same 7 rules as before. He finished writing and handed me the new card. These rules exist for a reason, Aiden. This store is built on something old. Something that was here long before Millbrook existed. Long before humans built towns in this area. The indigenous people who lived here called this place cursed ground and refused to build on it. When the settlers came, they ignored the warnings. Built a trading post on this exact spot. Everyone who worked there disappeared within a year. The store has been rebuilt 5 times, Gerald continued. Different owners, different names, but always the same location. And always the same problems. Until my grandfather figured out the rules, tested them, refined them, passed them down. The rules keep it contained, keep it from spreading beyond these walls. As long as we follow them, we are protected. The moment we break them, we invite it in. We give it permission to interact with us. We become vulnerable. What is it? I asked, though I was not sure I wanted to know. He moved to the back office and returned with a folder, old and worn, stuffed with papers. He opened it on the counter, revealing photographs, diagrams, newspaper clippings, handwritten notes in various styles spanning decades. The oldest documents were yellowed with age, written in ink that had faded to brown. It has many names, Gerald said softly. Many forms. Different cultures called it different things. Shadow Walker, the hungry dark, the thing between, the void that feeds. But what it wants is always the same. To consume, to spread, to pull our world into its world, piece by piece, person by person. The rules do not just keep you safe. They keep it weak. They keep it hungry. That is all we can do. He showed me photographs from throughout the store's history. Black and white images from the 1950s showing this same building, different signage, but same location. Newspaper clippings about missing persons, all employees of stores at this address. Police reports with details redacted. Witness statements describing impossible things. There were diagrams too, drawn by Gerald's grandfather, showing the layout of the store and marking certain areas. The freezer was circled in red with notes about temporal displacement and dimensional thinning. The phone was marked with warnings about voice mimicry and psychological manipulation. The floor near the entrance had notations about manifestation points. Every detail of the store had been studied, documented, understood. Why do you stay? I asked Gerald. Why keep the store open at all? Why not just tear it down, build something else? Gerald looked at me with those haunted eyes. We tried. Twice. The first time, in 1967, they demolished the building completely, cleared the foundation, poured new concrete. Within 3 months, strange things started happening in every building within a 2-block radius. Disappearances, unexplained deaths. It spreads when we do not contain it. The store focuses it, gives it a single point of entry. As long as we maintain this location and follow the rules, it stays here. Contained. And the second time? I asked. 2003, Gerald said. A development company bought the land. They were going to turn this whole block into a parking structure. They brought in heavy equipment, started excavation. The workers found something under the foundation. A chamber carved from solid rock, far older than any human settlement in this area. They went inside to investigate. All 6 of them. 3 came back. Changed. Wrong. They had to be institutionalized. The other 3 were never found. The company abandoned the project. We rebuilt the store exactly as it had been done. He closed the folder and looked at me seriously. You understand now why the pay is so high. You are not just a cashier, Aiden. You are a guard, a keeper. You stand between our world and something that should not exist. Every night you work here, you protect everyone in Millbrook, everyone in the surrounding towns, maybe everyone everywhere. We do not know how far it could spread if fully released. That I looked at the rules in my hand, now memorized, now terrifyingly clear. 7 simple rules that stood between civilization and something ancient and terrible. Can I ask you something? I said quietly. Of course, Gerald replied. Why 7 rules? Is that number significant? Gerald smiled slightly, but there was no humor in it. We do not know. My grandfather tested dozens of different protocols over the years. Some worked, some did not. Some made things worse. These 7 rules are what emerged from decades of trial and error. We think 7 is significant to whatever is here, that it respects that number, but we cannot be certain. All we know is that these 7 work. Deviating from them does not. I went home that morning exhausted beyond anything I had ever experienced. Sleep came in fitful bursts, interrupted by nightmares of darkness and wet footprints and voices calling my name from phones I could not reach. When I woke in the afternoon, I seriously considered quitting, finding a normal job, working daylight hours at a normal store where the only dangers were robberies and unpleasant customers. But my rent was due. My student loans demanded payment. My car was making concerning noises. I needed this job. The money was too good to walk away from. And if what Gerald said was true, if the store was actually containing something terrible, then walking away meant leaving Millbrook vulnerable, leaving everyone vulnerable. Could I live with that? That night, when I returned from my shift, I was different. The rules were no longer suggestions or quirky policies. They were survival. They were protection. They were sacred law that could not be broken under any circumstances. Gerald met me at the door, looking relieved that I had come back. Many do not return after their first real encounter. I am ready, I told him. I understand now. He handed me a new note card with the 7 rules written in his shaking hand. Keep this with you at all times. When you feel tired, when you feel skeptical, when you feel tempted to cut corners, read them again. Remember what happened. Remember what is waiting for you to make a mistake. I took the card and put it in my front pocket, where I could feel its presence constantly. Gerald showed me a few more things before he left. How to check if the door sensors were working properly, ensuring the bell always chimed for normal customers. How to test the lights to ensure 3 were always functioning. How to verify the phone was properly connected. Each detail mattered. Each precaution was essential. That night passed without major incident. I followed every rule precisely. I kept 3 lights on, spread throughout the store for maximum coverage. At 11:08 p.m., a teenager asked for the usual, and I told him we were out of stock. He looked confused but accepted it and left normally. At 12:47 a.m., I avoided looking at my reflection in every surface. At 1:34 a.m., the phone rang and I let it ring, ignoring the voices that called my name. At 2:21 a.m., I heard knocking from the freezer, knocked back twice, waited exactly 5 minutes, and found another frost message. This one learns that at 3:09 a.m., a woman in a red dress arrived. I served her in 43 seconds. She smiled at me and said quietly, "Good boy. You are learning the dance." She left normally, and I watched her drive away in a red sedan. At 4:17 a.m., a man entered without triggering the door chime. I kept my head down, continued restocking, never made eye contact. He wandered the aisles for 30 minutes, never speaking, never selecting anything. At 4:47 a.m., he left, passing through the door again without triggering the sensor. The rules worked. As long as I followed them exactly, nothing could touch me. But I saw things. Every night, I saw things that should not exist. Shadows that moved independently of their sources. Sounds that came from nowhere and everywhere at once. Brief glimpses of something massive and terrible lurking just beyond the edge of vision, watching, waiting, hoping for a mistake. I worked at Quick Stop for 2 more weeks, following the rules religiously. Each night brought new encounters. The woman in the blue coat returned twice more, always asking for the usual, always accepting my refusal with that horrible smile before walking through the door. The phone rang every night between 1 a.m. and 1:30 a.m., using different voices each time. Crying children, screaming adults, laughing teenagers, all of them knowing my name, all of them begging me to answer. The knocking from the freezer became routine, happening at least once every shift. Each time I knocked back twice, waited 5 minutes, and found new messages. Good, patient, obedient, safe. The tally marks kept multiplying, covering more of the walls, reaching toward the ceiling. I wondered how long something had been trapped in there. Decades? Centuries? Longer? I learned to navigate the store between midnight and 4 a.m. with my eyes carefully focused on non-reflective surfaces. I learned to recognize the customers in red before they even entered, something about their vehicles or their posture visible through the window. I learned that the entity that entered without triggering the door chime came exactly 3 nights per week, always between 4 a.m. and 5 a.m., always staying approximately 30 minutes at the end of my 3rd week. Gerald called me into the office during shift change. You have done well, Aiden. Better than most. You follow the rules consistently. You pay attention. You have survived longer than the last 3 employees combined. I have a proposal for you. He opened a desk drawer and pulled out a folder, newer than the historical one he had shown me before. Inside were employment contracts, insurance forms, benefit documentation. I am getting old. My hands shake more each day. I need someone to take over eventually. Someone who understands what this place really is. Someone who can train new employees. Someone who can protect Millbrook when I am gone. You want me to become manager? I asked, surprised. Eventually, yes. For now, I want you to start training others. I have hired a new employee, Riley. She starts tomorrow night. You will work together, show her the rules, help her understand. Can you do that? I thought about my first night, about breaking the first rule, about the terror I had felt. Could I help someone else navigate this nightmare? Could I teach them the rules and make them understand without them having to experience what I experienced? Yes, I said. I can do that. Gerald smiled, relief evident on his lined face. Good. Remember, some people will not believe at first. Mark certainly did not. Be patient, but be firm. The rules are not negotiable. Who is Mark? I asked. The employee before you, Gerald said quietly. He lasted 5 nights. Broke 4 rules. We never found his body, only his shoes, left neatly outside the bathroom door. The next night, I arrived 30 minutes early to prepare. I wrote out the 7 rules in my own hand, trying to make my handwriting clear and legible despite my nervousness. I checked all the lights, tested the door sensor, verified the phone connection. Everything needed to be perfect for Riley's first night. She arrived at 9:55 p.m., 5 minutes early, which I took as a good sign. Riley was 26 years old, with short brown hair and cautious eyes. She wore jeans and a quick-stop polo that was slightly too large. And she carried a thermos of coffee that said powered by caffeine and sarcasm. She looked competent, professional, but also slightly nervous. Hi. I am Aiden, I said, shaking her hand. I will be training you tonight. Riley, she replied. Her grip was firm, confident. Thanks for showing me the ropes. I have worked retail before, so I know the basics. Register, stocking, customer service, all that. This place is a little different, I said carefully. There are some specific rules you need to follow. They might seem strange at first, but they are very important. I showed her the 7 rules I had written out. She read them slowly, her expression shifting from interest to confusion to concern. These are unusual, she said diplomatically. They are necessary, I replied. I am not going to tell you why just yet. I want you to see for yourself. But you need to promise me you will follow them exactly, even if they do not make sense. Riley looked at me, studying my face. She seemed to sense that I was serious, that this was not a joke or some weird hazing ritual. Okay, she said slowly. I will follow them. But you have to explain eventually. I will, I promised. Probably by the end of tonight. The evening started normally. I showed Riley how to work the register, how to stock the shelves, where everything was located. She was a quick learner, asking good questions, taking mental notes. At 10:37 p.m., I made sure 3 specific lights were on and the rest were off. This saves on electricity, I explained. But these 3 must always stay on. Never turn them all off. Why these 3 specifically? Riley asked. Coverage, I said. 1 in front, 1 in the middle, 1 in back. It ensures the whole store has some light. Just trust me on this. At 11:19 p.m., an old man entered and approached the counter. He smiled at me familiarly. Good evening, Aiden. I would like the usual, please. I am sorry, sir. We are out of stock tonight, I said immediately. The man's smile faded. He looked at Riley, then back at me. Are you certain? I am very hungry. I am certain, I said firmly. Perhaps tomorrow. The man stared at us for a long moment, his eyes searching our faces. Then he nodded and left normally through the door. Riley looked confused. Why did you refuse him? We have plenty of everything. Rule 2, I reminded her. Anyone asks for the usual, say you are out of stock. But why? He seemed like a regular customer. Was he? I asked. Have you ever seen him before? Riley paused. No, but I have only been here an hour. Exactly, I said. Real regular customers specify what they want. They do not say the usual. That phrase is a test. You passed by letting me handle it at 12:33 a.m. I demonstrated Rule 3. Watch, I said, approaching a refrigerator unit with a reflective glass door. I carefully angled myself so I could see the products inside without seeing my reflection. Riley, look at that unit and tell me what you see. She walked over and looked directly at the glass. I see sodas, energy drinks, and your reflection standing behind me. She paused. Wait, you are not standing behind me. You are next to me. But your reflection is behind mine in the glass. That I quickly pulled her away from the refrigerator. That is why we do not look at reflections between midnight and 4 a.m. What you see is not always what is really there. Riley's face had gone pale. That was not a trick. That was not some optical illusion. That was real, I confirmed. Between midnight and 4, the reflections show truth. And sometimes the truth is something we should not see. At 1:04 a.m., the phone began to ring. Riley reached for it automatically. I caught her wrist gently but firmly. No, let it ring, but someone might need help. She protested. One who needs real help calls a convenience store at 1 a.m. I said, listen. We stood in silence as the phone rang. After the 10th ring, a voice began speaking, coming from the phone itself, even though neither of us had answered. Riley, is that you? Please answer. It is Mom. I need you to come home. Something is wrong. Please pick up. Riley's face went sheet white. That was my mother's voice. How is that possible? Rule 6, I said quietly. Never answer after 1 a.m. It is not your mother. It is something that knows what your mother sounds like. The voice continued, growing more desperate. Riley, please. I am hurt. I need you. Why are you not answering? Please. As we listened, the voice changed subtly, becoming distorted, layered with other sounds. The desperation became too exaggerated, too theatrical. This is your fault. You never call. You never visit. You are a terrible daughter. You deserve what is coming. Riley backed away from the phone, her hand over her mouth. Oh my God. The voice cut off abruptly, replaced by grinding, screaming sounds that lasted exactly 10 seconds before falling silent. On the wall behind the phone, new scratches appeared, forming words as we watched. Hello, Riley. We know you now. At 2:07 a.m., we heard knocking from the freezer. 3 measured knocks. Riley looked at me questioningly. Rule 4, I reminded her. Knock twice and walk away. Wait 5 minutes. She approached the freezer carefully and knocked twice. Immediately, frantic pounding erupted from inside, so violent it shook the entire unit. Riley jumped back with a yelp. What the hell is that? Something that wants out, I said. We wait 5 minutes. Not 4. Not 6. Exactly 5. We waited, watching the clock. At exactly 2:12 a.m., I opened the freezer door. Riley gasped. The back wall was covered in tally marks, thousands upon thousands, and written in frost were the words, Hello, Riley. Stay safe. How does it know my name? She whispered. It knows everything about us, I said. That is why the rules are so important. At 3:28 a.m., a man in a completely red tracksuit entered. Riley looked at me nervously. Rule 5. She asked. I nodded. 60 seconds. Go. Asterisk. We worked together, a perfect team. I handled the register while Riley bagged. The man selected his items quickly, almost as if he was cooperating. We completed the transaction in 52 seconds. As the man left, he turned back and looked at us. You two work well together. That is good. You will need each other. Then he was gone. Asterisk. At 4:23 a.m., someone entered without triggering the door chime. I immediately focused on the shelf I was stocking, keeping my eyes down. Riley started to look up, but I whispered urgently, Rule 7. Do not look. Do not engage. For 40 minutes, we worked in silence. both of us keeping our eyes averted, never acknowledging the presence that wandered the aisles. I could hear it moving, could feel it passing close by, could sense it studying us. Finally, at 5:03 a.m., it left, again without triggering the door chime. When Gerald arrived at 5:30 a.m., Riley looked exhausted, terrified, but also determined. She understood now. She had seen enough to believe. Gerald looked at both of us, recognition in his eyes. "You showed her everything?" he asked. "Everything," I confirmed. "And?" He looked at Riley. "I will follow the rules," she said firmly. "Every single one. Every single night." Gerald smiled. "Good. Welcome to Quick Stop. Welcome to the real job." Over the following weeks, Riley and I worked together seamlessly. She never questioned the rules, never tried to test them, never made the mistakes I had made. We developed a rhythm, a partnership built on shared knowledge of what lurked in Quick Stop's darkness. We protected each other, and we protected Millbrook. But the encounters continued. Every night brought new horrors. The woman in the blue coat evolved her tactics, sometimes appearing as different people, but always asking for the usual in the same layered voice. The phone developed new strategies, using voices of dead relatives, famous people, even our own voices calling to us from the past or future. The freezer began leaving personalized messages, showing us things it claimed to know about our lives, our fears, our secrets. The customers in red became more frequent, sometimes arriving in groups, always requiring perfect timing and coordination. The entity that entered without chiming started staying longer, moving closer, testing the boundaries of our non-acknowledgement. And through it all, we followed the rules. Every single night, every single rule. I have now worked at Quickstop for 6 months. Riley has been here for 5. Together, we have trained 3 more employees. Not all of them lasted. One quit after the first night, refusing to believe what she had seen, trying to convince herself it was all elaborate pranks. She moved away from Millbrook entirely, and I hope she never looks back. Another lasted a week before breaking down, the psychological pressure too much to bear. He now works day shifts at a grocery store across town, having negotiated with Gerald to never work nights again. But the third new employee, Marcus, he stayed. He learned. He understood. Now we have a team of 4 people who rotate through the night shifts, never alone, always in pairs, always following the rules. Gerald is training me to handle more management responsibilities, preparing for his eventual retirement. The folder of historical documents now includes entries in my handwriting, documenting the patterns I have noticed, the strategies that work, the warning signs to watch for. I know now that this is my life's work. This is what I am meant to do. Protecting Millbrook from something ancient and terrible. Standing guard over a thin place where our world touches something it should not. Following 7 simple rules that stand between civilization and in consuming darkness that waits with infinite patience for us to make a mistake. The rules are not suggestions. They are not guidelines. They are survival. They are the difference between life and death, between sanity and madness, between our world and something else. I learned this the hard way, by breaking the first rule and nearly paying the ultimate price. So if you ever find yourself in Millbrook, if you ever stop at Quick Stop late at night, know that the people working there are not just cashiers. We are guardians. We are keepers of something that should not be. And those strange rules we follow, rules that might seem arbitrary or ridiculous, are all that keeps the darkness contained. Follow the rules. Every single one. No exceptions. No variations. No shortcuts. Your life might depend on it. I am Aiden. I am 23 years old, and I work the night shift at a convenience store that sits on top of something ancient and hungry. There are 7 rules I must follow. I broke one of them once. I will never make that mistake again.